Now joining us on Skype is Dr. Craig Cypher. He is a sports psychologist and also a professor at the University of Rochester Medical Center. Craig, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's a bit of an unusual circumstance, that's for sure. Recently, you actually wrote an article concerning what student athletes can do mentally as they kind of cope with the coronavirus. The first thing I want to touch on, though, is how much of an influence does sports psychology have on student athletes just on a normal basis?
Yeah, so I know as part of our program that we have at the University of Rochester Fitness Science program, we actually incorporate sports psychology in with strength and conditioning, along with nutrition, and really kind of thinking about sports psychology in a different way. And so, really thinking about how just like we can work in the weight room to get stronger, right? We can work on our speed, we can work on our sport-specific skills. That mindset is something that we can build through training that we do at a group level, at an individual level.
Absolutely. Now, the article that you actually wrote, it's actually called How Student Athletes Can Cope with the Consequences of the Coronavirus Pandemic. What inspired this article and why'd you write it?
So just last week, which feels like a long time ago right now, a couple of teams with spring sports teams, both with softball and with women's lacrosse, were faced with the reality of school being canceled, their sports season being canceled on them, and it was really a huge loss. It was really a really difficult, dramatic loss for them. And so we had group sessions to kind of help them to process through all the feelings, help them to kind of get retargeted in terms of what do they think they need, and how do they support each other as teammates through this thing. And so I think it was really helpful both for them and for their coaches to kind of think about, all right, how do we support these athletes in this huge change that's going on? And I quickly began thinking about, just outside of just these two teams and outside of just the university, like how dramatic an impact this was going to have on college athletes, on high school athletes across the country.
Well, it's very generous of you to want to help athletes, not just in your area, but everywhere across the country. Let's actually break down the 4 different steps that you actually had in your article. The first one was be connected and stay connected. Now, I think when everyone hears that, they're probably thinking social media, digital communication. Is that the extent of what you were talking about?
Well, I think I was talking about like a little bit beyond that. I think I really kind of talk about like how if we think about face-to-face connection being 100% of that emotional connection that we have, with some of the research that we talk about, it starts to decrease rapidly when we start using technology. So if we're thinking about just the voice that we hear, that goes down to like 40%, and then when it goes down to just the words we use, that's like 7 to 10%. Of how much emotion and connection actually comes through. So we really have to be careful. I think text can be one of those things where things get misunderstood and we don't feel as connected. So really pushing people, especially in this era of social distancing, to put more of an emphasis on kind of actual video chat platforms to kind of help them to stay connected.
I think having those face-to-face interactions, even if it's digitally, probably does help. But the second part that you talked about was something that I really like and something that I think I'm applying to my life at this time. It was control the controllables. What exactly does that mean?
So it's interesting. This is kind of upended. There's so much uncertainty, and we're really not sure what this means for our sports worlds, our day-to-day lives, what things are going to look like in terms of work, in terms of school, in terms of academics. And we need to come back to the basics of what's controllable. And I always say that the things that we can control come down to our effort, our attitude, and how we respond to things. And so what am I going to do in terms of the work that I'm going to put in? With attitude, it may be hard to be positive about this, but how do we get to just kind of be neutral, focused on the present? What can we take care of now? And then in terms of our response, all these things that are out of our control, we need to find a way to just focus on how am I going to respond to this? And really on a day-to-day basis right now, because that's where we are. We need to focus on those things.
Yeah, now the third thing that you actually discussed in your article was actually find and seize opportunities. This is interesting, particularly for our show, because we've been doing all these digital things. It's an opportunity to get creative. What else did you mean by this section of the article?
So for this, I was really kind of talking about how, the one thing that we may have is a little bit more of a gift of time right now. And so, how do we use that time? So, there's still wonderful opportunities in terms of fitness, in terms of continuing to build strength, speed, and conditioning. There's great resources out there through our fitness science program, through other programs that are out there that are doing great work in terms of at-home workouts. What are the things you can do in terms of your sports-specific skills? How do you reassess nutrition now? If we're not going and grabbing fast food and eating out as much, like how do we really focus on really good nutrition that you can do at home? And I think most importantly, of course, I'm biased, but it's about mindset. This is a great time to use the time to kind of help work on your mental game.
Now, the fourth and final thing that you kind of said that kids can use to cope with this epidemic is remembering the why. I'm not exactly sure what you meant by that, but I did want to quote one thing that I thought was really interesting. You said, "One day we are all going to remember the moment that COVID-19 became real to us." I mean, that's a big and powerful statement.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think last week and a lot of things that were going on in the world. For some people, it's going to be those moments like the athletes that I work with, where their school got canceled or their season got canceled. It may have been when the NBA or NCAA championships got canceled, or Tom Hanks getting getting diagnosed. But all those things there's a part where it becomes real that things have changed, and thinking about then the things that we're doing now, it can be hard to be socially distancing and having a new way of life. But part of that is the why of what that means for our larger society. That you're the one who's now, if even though it may be a mild case for you in terms of getting this, but you're the one who's helping to protect our health system. You're the one who's helping to protect the athletic trainer at school who has to take care of a parent in their 80s. And so that part of like the larger why is really important here. And then I think your own personal why, like, having, some of these things taken away can make you think about like, what do I love about my sport and how do I rededicate myself to it? Because we're going to get back to a new normal. It is going to happen. And how do I get think about what my why is and use that why to drive us through this time of uncertainty.
Well, Dr. Cypher, I think that you have a really powerful message, and it really is nice that you're kind of bringing a little bit of light in a dark situation. I know you have 3 sons at home, so I'm sure it's been a very busy time in your household, but I hope that you guys all stay happy and you stay healthy, and thank you so much for joining us.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much.